guys, and welcome to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Erin and I will be walking you through the pattern today. A couple things I wanted to touch on first, some elements of the design. It's an office style blouse that's designed to be tucked into your pants, which means that the front and back sections have a little break at the side seams towards the bottom so that when you tuck it into your pants, it doesn't bunch under the pants and show through. Keep in mind when lengthening and shortening the body that you always want it to be a little bit longer so that you can tuck it into pants. And the sleeves always have to be a little bit longer because you want that billowy flowiness to come over top of the cuffs. You can add another buttonhole for a button if you wish. You also don't have to. What I've done is I have a brooch right there. I've chosen to leave it a regular collar so that I can pin through with any number of different brooches that I would like to wear. Okay, let's get at it. Follow the appropriate instructions on each one of the pattern pieces. The grain lines can be found as the only long arrow being stricken through each one of the pattern pieces. Here you'll notice that I have different colors for the different fabrics. The darker gray represents the lighter flowier fabric, and the lighter gray represents the more structured cotton. You're going to need to cut out 3 collar pieces, 1 out of iron-on fusible stabilizer and 2 out of your accent fabric. After you iron on the fusible stabilizer to the wrong side of one of the pieces, be sure to do the exact same thing to the other side, and then sew up both arm seams. Pin all along the remaining seam edge. After cutting out all 4 sleeve cuff pieces, press the seam allowances towards the wrong side along the seam that will meet with the sleeve body. This is the largest and most curved. Then pin along the remaining seam edges. Do this for both pairs. Now we're going to sew up all the seams that we haven't ironed the seam allowances down. Do this for both of the sleeve cuffs. Starting just within the seam allowances that we've ironed down at the neckline, we're going to sew all along the top of the collar, and then we're going to stop once more just before the pieces we ironed down. Before we turn the collar right side out, we're going to want to clip along inside the seam allowance. Now, get really close to the seam itself, but don't clip the seam. You're going to want to do this along absolutely every bit of the curve. You don't have to do it along the straight parts, but if you don't do it along the curved parts, it's not going to turn properly when we go to turn it inside out. Make sure that those edges that we iron down are towards the inside when we flip it. And now go on and turn that baby inside out. Get your fingers on in there and make sure that that seam gets pushed out in every direction so that it's nice and flat. All those little sleeve cuff corners, we're going to trim those off because those are going to bunch up when we go to turn them right side out. This is my favorite method. I just stick my thumbs inside the corners, meet them with my fingers on the other side, and turn. We're going to take a minute to just go and press all of those back down. Make sure that you've got your stabilizer on the inside of your collar folded correctly so that it's not going to lay weird when you iron it. And then we're just going to iron the seam or the sleeve cuffs as well. Press, press, press. We're going to take our one back panel and we're going to unfold it, lay it out right side up. And then we're going to take the 2 pieces of our raglan shoulders and we're going to find the seam that says towards back, and then we're going to put that right sides down, meet it up with the shoulder seams right sides together on the back panel, both of them. And then we're going to pin or clip in place and then sew those seams. After we put it back, we're going to realign the shoulders so that they're kind of more like the shirt would be if we were wearing it. And then we're going to take the 2 front pieces and we're going to lay them right sides down over top of our back and our shoulder pieces. We want to make sure to line up the shoulder seams and make sure that the pieces are right sides together. Once you've done that, pin or clip in place and sew.
When unfolded, your pieces should look like this. Now is a good time to top stitch all 4 shoulder seams. Your top stitching will look best if you stitch through the lighter fabric into the more structured fabric. Now it's time to attach the sleeve to the body. We have 2 pieces and it doesn't matter which one you use. Normally, sleeves would have a side, but in this pattern, because of so much flounce and extra ease, they don't. I have found the easiest way to line up the sleeves for sewing is to open up the main body like so, front and back panels apart, and then right sides together, line up the center of the sleeve body with the top of the shoulder, and then start at one corner and pin or clip all the way over to the next corner. Be sure to do the exact same thing to the other side. When you lay it back out again, it should start to look kind of like a cross, and then sew up both arm seams. Now we're going to add the button strips to the inside of both of the front panels. What you're going to want to do is lay out your shirt that we have at this point. We still haven't sewn up the side seams along the arms. We're going to put right sides together along the very front seam of each of the front panels. That's where the neckline opens up. We're going to do this to both sides, right sides together, and then we're going to pin or clip in place for both of the button strips and then sew them both up. Right now I'm going along and finishing any of the raw edges that I have left, because if it's not already in a seam, it has the potential later to be in a finishing seam that could unravel if it's the sort of fabric that frays. Now, on both sides, we're going to press that seam for the button strip towards the strip itself. Now this is a do as I say, not as I do moment. You're going to want to turn up your seam allowance or your finished edge, press that, and then turn it up the rest of the way and press once more. I bought buttons that were just a little bit too big, so I said screw it to my seam allowance and just used that as my extra so that I wouldn't have a button strip that was too small for my buttons. If you made that mistake, go for it. Do my hack on how to fix it. And now, working from the right side of your button strip, top stitch along that seam that should be stitching through to your finished edge or your seam allowance on the other side. You should be encasing all 2 layers and top stitching the first layer through. As always, and of course, do this to both sides. Now, before we sew up the side seams along with the arms, we're going to actually turn up all of our bottom edges and do some hemming. The reason for this is because we're going to leave the seam partially open, so we actually want to do our finishing now instead of after we've sewn the garment's edges together. It's finally time to sew up the side seams and arms, but before we do, we want to make sure we're doing it right, so we're going to lay it out in our kind of open formation cross. And then we're going to take the front and lay it right over top of the right side of the back panel. Do what I'm doing right here to both sides. We're going to pin the arm and side seams closed, keeping in mind that we're going to start a little bit away from each edge, and we're going to leave about 4 inches of unsewn seam open at each end. Right here, I'm determining that distance. As you pin close the side seam, ensure to line up the underarm seams so that they match. When we sew up both of the side seams along with the arm, we're going to leave a portion at each end open, 4 inches from sleeve cuff up the arm, and then at least 3 inches, more if you would like, from the bottom of the shirt up the side seam. Now we're going to press the seam allowances open along each one of the sleeves and the side seams. This will help us to finish the edges that we left open earlier. And now it's time to finish the edges that we left open. What we're going to do is top stitch from one side up across the seam and down the other. Here you can see me placing a pin at the exact point at which I want to stop and turn around. I'm going to sew up one side, top stitching, stop at my pin, pull the pin out, leave the needle down but lift my presser foot, straighten out my seam edge, put it back down, and then I'm going to hand crank the wheel just a couple of stitches. Needle down once more, press your foot back up, turn, and go back down the rest of the seam. You'll want to complete the exact same process for both of the side seams at the body and the sleeves. Now it's time to attach the sleeve cuff to the sleeve body. Working within the seam allowances that we've already ironed down, stay to the one side that will get folded just down and not also down and in. That's that one little corner. If you sew to that side, you're going to have a hard time turning it over. Now the sleeve body seam is longer than the sleeve cuff. This is on purpose so that we can add some cute little pleats all the way along. What you want to do is split the difference however you see fit. Add as many or as few pleats as you'd like. What I've done here is I've split the difference about 4 times, which will give me 5 different equal spaced little pleats. What you see me doing is finding the center of each point and then re-finding the center of each point so that I can match them up for my equal spaced little pleats. I suggest you do the same, or you could always stitch within the stitch allowance on the sleeve body and then pull to gather the stitches equally and then sew in the seam allowance. It's your choice. It's time to pin the collar in place. What I suggest you do is you find the center of the collar and the center back of your shirt and you pin those both together. Now, working from within the seam allowance that we've ironed down already, you're going to work from one side of the collar and then the other, pinning from each end of the collar towards the center. Depending upon the size of the shirt that you've decided to construct, your next seam might be slightly larger than the collar. If this is the case, what you need to do is insert a back pleat at the center of the back panel. Sew the collar to the neck seam of the blouse, staying just within the ironed line of our seam allowance. Do the same for the sleeve cuffs. Sew them to the sleeve body, staying just within the ironed line of our seam allowance. Because we ironed up our seam allowances, they should just want to turn up and in. We're going to want to pin everything in place so that the two sides are equally matched, and then we're going to top stitch all along that seam. Preferably from the outside, because that's the side that everybody's going to look at. So take your time with it, make sure that all the seams are matching, and pin, pin, pin. Do the same for the sleeve cuffs as well. Everything should naturally want to turn up because we ironed it. Stitching through all the layers, we're going to close up the cuffs and the collar. You can top stitch these closed using a single or double needle. There is no right or wrong. Congratulations, you're 99% done. You've basically got a completed shirt at this point. In this video, I use a button kit to construct the buttons that I'm going to use on my shirt. However, I've got another video in shorts on my channel about how to do it the old-fashioned way. If you're also going to use a button kit, just follow the instructions on your kit. Measure the size of your buttons to help you determine how long the buttonholes should be. It's rather important that you test the size of your buttonholes before actually doing them on your shirt. Make sure to pick a piece of fabric that matches the fabric that you're going to have the buttonholes in, and then test out for size, thickness, make sure that the buttons can go through, test it out. After testing how long my buttonholes need to be to accommodate for my buttons, I'm spacing them equally here. You can decide how far you want your buttons apart. That's all personal preference and up to you entirely. Do the same for your sleeve cuffs. Construct your buttonholes using the foot and instructions provided with your sewing machine and manual. Now it's just a matter of sewing your buttons on in the right place. All you need to do is fold your button strip over with the holes in it and mark with a pin in the center where the little button is going to attach, and then fold it back over, revealing the pin. Be careful not to pull out the pin when you fold it back over. Congratulations, you've finished. Now go wear it out and tell everybody I made this.